Boundless Immigration News, Weekend Review, June 17, 2022. U.S. ends COVID-19 test requirements for air travelers. The Biden administration last week lifted its requirements for all air travelers entering the United States to show proof of a negative COVID-19 test. The new policy went into effect June 12th. A senior administration official at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, will reassess the change in 90 days and will continue to evaluate its ongoing basis. The decision was applauded by the travel industry, which for months has pushed the administration to drop the testing requirement. The CDC still requires that most non-U.S. citizens be fully vaccinated to enter the U.S. For more info, check out the Boundless article answering common questions about COVID and travel. SCOTUS issues decision limiting immigrants' rights. The Supreme Court is in the midst of releasing several opinions as it nears the end of its current term, and this past week saw two decisions on immigration detention, neither of which were positive for immigrants. In the first decision, the court ruled that a man who was assaulted by a Border Patrol agent had no right to sue the agent for violating his constitutional rights. The decision was made 6-3 along ideological lines and only narrowly avoided overruling a 1971 precedent that allowed federal courts to allow certain kinds of lawsuits against federal agents who violate people's constitutional rights. The second decision was found that thousands of immigrants waiting for court hearings can be detained in immigration jails indefinitely, with no right to a bond hearing. The decision locks in place a system which holds people in sometimes dangerous and squalid conditions for potentially years at a time, even if they have committed no crime and are not a threat to the community. There are approximately 24,500 people in immigration detention, and the immigration court backlog currently stands at over 1.8 million cases. Trump-era judge blocks DHS policy. President Biden's immigration agenda took another hit this week after a federal judge in Texas blocked a major Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, policy that instructs immigration authorities to prioritize for deportation people who possess a serious threat to public safety and national security. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas announced the policy last year, arguing that being in the country illegally should not be a sole basis for arrest. Mayorkas' guidelines are in sharp contrast to the enforcement discretion ICE officers had under the previous Trump administration, which allowed the agency to detain and deport anyone present in the U.S. without proper authorization. The ruling comes as a blow to the Biden administration, which has struggled to roll back many of the previous administration's policies. SCOTUS teases state effort to intervene in public charge. The U.S. Supreme Court earlier this week threw out an attempt by Arizona and 12 other states to defend a controversial Trump-era policy that made it harder for legal immigrants to live in the country if they use certain public benefits. The policy, a 2019 change to the public charge rule, was a complicated revision of a long-standing guidance and was roundly criticized as discriminatory and as a wealth test. A lawsuit led by Arizona stemmed from the Biden administration's decision to withdraw the rule in March 2021. The states argued that the federal government was declining to defend the rule, and they sought permission to defend the dead rule in federal court instead of the government. The appeals court denies the request, and a group of states appealed the U.S. Supreme Court. Though the court initially agreed to hear the case, Wednesday it dismissed it without a decision. Trump administration delayed reuniting families. Leaked emails show immigration officials deliberately waited to reunite migrant children with their parents, shedding more light onto the Trump-era family separation policy. The emails, sent by high and middle-ranking DHS officials in May 2018, several weeks after the beginning of the Trump administration's zero-tolerance family separation policy officially went into effect, were released as part of a massive cache of international documents the Biden administration turned over to lawyers for migrants impacted by the previous administration's policy. Advocates claim the email exchanges proved that the Trump administration not only intended to separate families and deter others from crossing into the U.S., but intended to inflict harm onto migrant families. At least 3,900 children were separated from their families under the zero-tolerance policy, and nearly 5,636 children were separated overall between mid-2017 and January 2021. DHS estimates that there are still approximately 1,000 children who have not yet been reunited with their families. DACA turns 10, but its future remains in doubt. 10 years after the establishment on June 15, 2012, the future of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program, remains uncertain as parallel legal battles play out across the country. The Fifth Circuit is set to hear oral arguments on July 6 after a federal judge in Texas declared DACA was unlawful last year. Since that time, thousands of applicants have been unable to work and risk being deported while their case is pending. A second lawsuit was filed in federal courts in New York, asking the court to protect work eligibility for nearly 80,000 DACA applicants who filed their applications between a Supreme Court ruling in 2020 and the Texas judge's decision in July 2021. Those are this week's top immigration news headlines. If you found this video helpful, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Boundless for the latest in immigration news. Thanks for watching.